so you kind of protected one another. And I just say God was watching over me. I never did really get into bad things. We got hit a couple times by artillery fire. A couple times, a couple of our trucks got hit by landmines, but I never did really see bad things, you know. So I'll say, just again, God was watching over me.
So, being in the military, did that help you like gain confidence in the Lord?
I thought definitely. I was not a strong Christian when I went into the Marine Corps, and I had my little New Testament, and I would read that just about every day. And guys would want me to go drinking. Guys would want me to go to another country for what they called R&R, and you could go mess around and do different things. Marijuana was starting to be big then, but I just say God was watching over me, and I never did do any of that stuff. And but anyway, it was, you know, the military helped me to be more disciplined in my life. It helped me be more thankful for my home. It helped me to grow up, you know. And it was basically a good experience. It wasn't always fun, but it was a good experience.
So while serving, did you stay in touch with your family?
Once a month in Vietnam, we could go over about midnight. There was a Jeep, and it had a great big radio on the back of it, and they called it a two-way radio. And we had a microphone, and they would call California, then California would call my home, and then my mom, it'd be like 12 o'clock in the afternoon at home, it'd be 12 o'clock midnight in Vietnam, and I could talk to my mom or whoever I would talk to. I had a girlfriend, but when you talked on the telephone, you'd have to say over, then they would switch, and then that person could talk to you, and when they got done, they would have to say over. It was different than just talking like on a regular telephone.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and then I wrote, you know, I'd get about a letter from somebody about once a week, and that was real neat. And you really look forward to getting letters because, you know, you were lonely and you wanted to go home. But again, it was a good experience. We actually had a basketball hoop set up. We had a barn and had concrete out front. We worked on the Jeeps and trucks in this barn, but out in the front was a great big concrete pad, kind of like you have at school to play basketball. And we had a basketball rim set up there, and we'd play basketball at night sometimes. But then at nighttime, when it got dark, you had guard duty. And the unit that I was in was an artillery unit, like tanks. And we would shoot in defense for the infantry that was out. You know, it could shoot up to 20 miles. The rounds or the bullets were this big, and they weighed about 50 to 75 pounds. And but I was a mechanic that worked on the Jeeps and trucks, but the tanks were set up on part of the outside perimeter, and at any time a tank could fire. And I remember the first time I got there and one of them fired, it was so loud, it shook like the little house that we lived in, and it just scared you. But after a while, like you said, you got used to it. So it was a good experience.
So this is going to be like a follow-up question.
Okay.
So like when you, like at 12 o'clock at night, did you have roommates in your house that you lived in?
Yeah. In they called it a hooch, okay? It was a plywood house with a metal roof, and you could open up the sides. It didn't have windows in it, but you could open up the sides of the hooch, and it had screens in there where the windows were supposed to be. But when it got colder in Vietnam, it would get 30, 40 degrees, and it would rain sometimes. But you'd close those wooden sides, and then you had screen doors too, and I can't remember if there was another door over it. But there was probably a dozen guys in each one of the houses, or hooches they call them. So, but again, it was a good experience. Every day we'd get 3 meals a day. You'd eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But at any time, you could have what they called a 100% alert. And if you had 100% alert, you had to stop what you're doing. And we had sand built up on the outside of our perimeter where we were at, and there were bunkers, and there were sandbags or holes down in the sand. And you had like machine guns at different places in the bunkers, and we had those tanks that were out there. And then I don't know if you've ever seen it, but we also had one Army tank there, and they said it was called a Twin 40, and it had the machine guns that go back and forth like this. But so again, and I'll just say God was watching over me. We never did really have a bad experience like some people did, but some people did.
Yeah. what was the food like? Do you remember what the food tasted
Yeah,
like?
the food was pretty good. We had powdered milk, but it tasted like regular milk to me. And we had Kool-Aid to drink. Sometimes on Sunday we would have steak. But the guys that were out in the field, let's say fighting the Viet Cong, they would eat sea rations, okay? And I never did go out in the field. I went out on guard duty one time, but we came back after about 4 hours. But again, I had it pretty nice because I was a mechanic. But the guys that were in infantry, that they would go out and look for Viet Cong and try to protect the Vietnamese people, you know, they had it a lot rougher than I did.
Yeah. How did people like entertain themselves?
Okay, well, like I said, at nighttime, after we ate supper, sometimes we played basketball. A lot of guys played cards, okay? Also, they had what they called an NCO club. You could go down there and drink pop or beer, and I never did that because I didn't like beer and I didn't drink beer. Some guys would, I made a little exercise place, and we had some weights so we could lift weights in that. And we had, trying to think what else we'd do. You could go to a store, they called it the PX, and it was just for people in the Army or Marine Corps or the Navy, and you could buy